Let us celebrate this beautiful union. May your lives be filled with joy.
Bumi was only 14 years old, but her beauty and humble nature made her stand out wherever she went. Her eyes carried both innocence and quiet strength, though deep inside she carried scars that no one could see. When she was very young, tragedy struck her home. Her beloved mother, the only one who truly cared for her, passed away. Life changed quickly after that. Her father, who could not bear to live alone, remarried a woman called Fumilayo. At first, it seemed like a new beginning for the family, but for Bumi, it was the beginning of another kind of pain. Fumilayo gave her smiles in public, but inside the house, Bumi knew she was on her own. When Fumilayo came into the family, she was full of energy and sweetness towards Bumi's father. She smiled often and spoke gently, but her true heart showed after she gave birth to her own children. The first was a boy named Femi, and later she had a girl named Bola. From that moment, her world began to revolve around the two of them. Fumilayo treated Femi and Bola like treasures of gold. She dressed them in the finest clothes she could afford. She cooked their favorite meals and served them with joy. When they cried, she comforted them quickly, wiping their tears with soft hands. When they were happy, she clapped and sang songs to make their joy even bigger. Everyone around the neighborhood could see that Fumilayo adored her children. But in the same house lived Bumi, her stepdaughter. To Fumilayo, Bumi was like a shadow, seen but not cared for. While Femi and Bola had clean new clothes, Bumi wore old, faded dresses, often patched many times. While Femi and Bola ate the sweetest meat and fish from the pot, Bumi was left with bones or cold leftovers. It was clear to all in the house that love was shared unequally. Bumi was expected to care for herself. If she was sick, she had to struggle alone. If she was hungry, she had to wait until everyone else had eaten before she could touch the pot. If her shoes tore, she had to walk barefoot until she found a way to fix them. Her father sometimes saw these, but said nothing. Maybe it was fear of losing peace in the home, or maybe he chose to look away. But silence became his shield. So, the young Bumi learned to endure. She woke up early in the morning to sweep the floor and fetch water, while her step-siblings still slept. She washed plates, cooked meals, and later carried Fumilayo's goods to the market. At the end of the day, Fumilayo would smile at her own children and say, "You are my joy," while walking past Bumi as if she did not exist. Bumi's life in her father's house was filled with silent struggles that only she understood. Every day reminded her that she was different from Femi and Bola. While her step-siblings wore bright new clothes, Bumi's dresses were old, faded, or torn in many places. Sometimes she patched them herself with needle and thread, but they still looked worn out. Shoes were a luxury she barely knew. On some days, she walked to the stream or market with bare feet, ignoring the sharp stones that bruised her feet. Beyond hunger and poor clothing, there was the burden of work. Bumi did almost everything in the house. She swept the compound before dawn, fetched water from the faraway stream, washed piles of clothes, and cooked food that she would later be denied. After finishing these chores, Fumilayo would hand her a tray of food items to sell in the market. Under the hot sun, Bumi would walk barefoot through the dusty streets, calling out to strangers to buy her goods. The sun burned her skin, sweat soaked her clothes, and sometimes she stumbled from weakness. Still, she will press on because she knows if she returns with unsold goods, Fumilayo's anger would fall on her. Her father sometimes saw the tiredness in her eyes. He noticed her thin arms carrying heavy loads, her cracked lips that spoke no complaint, and her rough hands that showed how much she labored. But instead of defending her, he chose silence. Perhaps he feared Fumilayo's temper, Or perhaps he believed that Bumi would endure and survive. His silence hurt more than Fumilayo's harshness because it reminded Bumi that she was alone. This was her daily life pain, hidden tears and unspoken endurance. Though young, she carried the weight of an adult with no one to protect her. Even though Bumi lived in a house where love was scarce, her heart remained pure. Pain could have made her bitter, but instead it made her gentle. She never allowed anger to rule her. When Femi and Bola played in the compound, she joined them with a smile. If they quarreled, she was the one who calmed them down. If they needed help with their schoolwork, she quietly guided them, even though she herself had been forced to stop school. Her step-siblings sometimes bragged about their new clothes or toys, but Bumi never showed envy. She tied their shoelaces when they struggled, carried them on her back when they were tired, and even shared her food with them when they were still hungry. Deep inside, she knew they were innocent children who only received the love their mother showered on them. For that reason, she refused to hate them. At night, when everyone else slept, Bumi would lie on her mat and dream of a different life. She imagined herself in a clean school uniform, carrying her books with pride. She dreamed of becoming a nurse or teacher, someone who could help others. These dreams kept her heart alive, even though her reality was harsh. Sometimes she wondered if she would spend her whole life serving in silence, never to be seen, never to be loved. But even in those moments, she whispered prayers, asking God to remember her. What made Bumi's heart special was her ability to hold on to kindness, even when kindness was not shown to her. She chose love over hate, hope over despair. Though her life looked hopeless to others, she believed in a quiet corner of her soul that one day light would break through her darkness. One hot afternoon, Fumilayo handed Bumi a tray filled with food items and ordered her to go out and sell them. The sun was harsh. The ground burned her bare feet, but Bumi balanced the heavy tray on her head and walked through the streets, calling out to strangers. Her voice was tired but steady, and her face, though weary, still carried the gentle beauty that many could not ignore. That day, Akin, a young man who had just returned from the USA, was passing by. He was home to visit his family after many years abroad. As he drove slowly through the busy street, his eyes caught sight of Bumi. At first, he noticed her beauty, but when he looked closer, he saw something more, her humility. The way she greeted customers with respect, the patience in her voice even when people mocked her for hawking. Akin did not forget her face. The next day, he returned to the same street and saw her again, carrying another tray. This time, he bought food from her just to hear her speak. Her words were soft and polite, even though sweat rolled down her cheeks and dust covered her feet. Something in Bumi touched his heart deeply. Over time, Akin began to ask questions in the neighborhood about the young girl. He learned that her name was Bumi, that her mother had died long ago, and that she lived with a stepmother who treated her harshly. People whispered about how she wore old clothes while her step-siblings were dressed well, how she worked endlessly in the house, and how her father kept silent. The more he heard, the more his respect for Bumi grew. He was amazed that a girl so young could carry so much pain and still remain humble and kind. Quietly, he began to watch her life, not out of pity, but out of admiration. In his heart, he knew that Bumi was not an ordinary girl. She had a spirit that hardship could not destroy. That silent observation was the beginning of something that would soon change Bumi's story forever. Akin could no longer keep his feelings to himself. After weeks of watching Bumi struggle, he made up his mind. This was not just pity, it was admiration. He saw in Bumi a rare kind of strength, the kind that comes from enduring suffering without letting it harden the heart. He knew he wanted her to be his wife. One evening, Akin dressed neatly and went to Bumi's father's house. He greeted respectfully and sat down with confidence. After a few words of introduction, he spoke clearly. "Sir, I have seen your daughter Bumi. I admire her beauty, her humility, and her heart. I have come to ask for her hand in marriage." The father's eyes widened in shock. He had expected Akin, a young man who had just returned from the USA, to seek someone from a wealthy or powerful family. Never had he imagined that someone like Akin would notice Bumi, the daughter he had silently allowed to suffer. For a moment, he could not find words. Before he could speak, Fumilayo's voice cut through the room like a knife. She laughed bitterly and shook her head. Marriage? This girl? She is only useful for hawking. She is not ready for marriage. Let her continue to work in the house. My children are still young and need her. Her words were sharp, but Akin was not moved. He sat upright and looked at Bumi's father with steady eyes. Sir, he said, I know what I want. I have watched Bumi closely. She is not just a girl for hawking. She is a woman of value, and I respect her deeply. My family supports my decision, and I am here to show you that I am serious. The room fell silent. The father shifted uncomfortably, torn between his wife's resistance and the strong conviction in Akin's voice. For the first time, he saw that someone else recognized Bumi's worth, something he had long ignored. Though Fumilayo muttered under her breath, Akin did not back down. His firmness showed that this was not a passing fancy. He truly meant every word. When news of Akin's proposal spread in the village, Fumilayo's heart burned with anger. She could not believe that a man like Akin, handsome, educated, and just returned from the USA, would choose Bumi over other girls in town. To her, it felt like an insult. She feared that if Bumi's life changed for the better, her own children, Femi and Bola, would be pushed into the shadows. Over my dead body will this happen, she shouted one evening, slamming her hands on the table. That girl was born to serve, not to rise above my children. If you give her out now, who will fetch water? Who will cook? Who will carry the tray to the market? Her words were filled with jealousy and her eyes blazed with hatred. She began to plot secretly, even sending messages to relatives, begging them to speak against the marriage. But when Akin's family came, they showed honor and respect. They brought gifts, spoke with humility, and declared firmly that their son had chosen Bumi and nothing would change his mind. Akin himself stood tall, his voice calm but unshaken. I have seen Bumi's worth with my own eyes. She is strong, kind, and true. She will be my wife. The more he spoke, the weaker Fumilayo's arguments became. Neighbors also began to whisper, saying, this girl has suffered enough. At last God has remembered her. Bumi's father sat quietly, torn between his wife's anger and the truth standing before him. For years, he had closed his eyes to Bumi's pain, allowing silence to cover his guilt. But now, as he saw Akin's family honor her daughter in a way he himself never did, his heart broke. He looked at Bumi, thin from years of neglect, but glowing with quiet dignity. At that moment, he realized how much he had failed her. Tears filled his eyes as he spoke softly. My daughter, forgive me. I did not see your value, but today I will not stand in your way. Those words silenced the room. For the first time, Bumi felt the weight of her father's love, though late. The conflict had reached its peak, but it was also the beginning of her freedom. The day of Bumi's marriage was like a dream come true. Neighbors and relatives gathered to watch the simple but joyful ceremony. Some whispered in amazement, saying, see how the girl who once hawked barefoot is now a bride.
Let us celebrate this beautiful union. May your lives be filled with joy.
who neglected you? If this story touched your heart, share it with someone today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring African stories.